I'm a bat. uh, so, more specifically, I am actually the bat at the very end of the 1982 horror film by Jean Rollin's The Living Dead Girl. This is the bat that's featured climbing up the walls during the very beautiful and insanely melancholic, tragic ending of this amazing, amazing film. And actually, Jean Rollin happens to be the topic of what we're discussing tonight. So, Jean Rollin is one of, if not my absolute favorite director just ever. He created films that can be described, or as he likes to describe them, as the fantastique, or his own unique genre of film that is supposed to be mysterious and nostalgic and beautiful, and yeah, it really is all those things. So, before we begin, there's a few things. This is Bob. So, I think he'll be joining us for a few videos from now on. I really like him. Bob actually is the living embodiment of old school style industrial, especially the music, concrete, noisy stuff. And as you can see, he is very much dead. But we love him. Of course, you know, Bob stands for buzzing, oscillating Bob. But what are we listening to before we go on? Well, of course, it's going to be relevant. It is the B music of Jean Rollin. This is by the amazing label Finders Keepers. And yeah, some really great stuff. We have stuff from Shiver of the Vampire, Rape of the Vampire, The Nude Vampire, Requiem for the Vampire, and great image. This is actually the image from Shiver of the Vampire. And nice little cardboard insert with some of the posters for these films. And as you can see, we're getting into some very trippy, surreal territory. Very late 60s, 70s, even 80s. Jean Rollin was making movies up to, I want to say, 2010 even, when he passed away. I can't think when his last movie, The Mask of Medusa, came out. Bad on me. This video is going to be very off the cuff. But with this video, I like to discuss just why I love his films, a little bit of a misunderstanding, or just about why these films are great and where you should start. Because as you will see with this director, Jean Rollin, if you look up any articles or videos, even on YouTube, he seems to be a very polarizing director. People either really love him or they think his movies are complete trash and garbage and they don't understand them. Or maybe not understand is the correct word, it's not for them, which is understandable. He's definitely a love it or hate it. I, for one, absolutely adore, and I think his movies are pure art, beautiful, melancholic, nostalgic, pure. You can't really get quite more gothic than his films, and I mean gothic in the truest sense of the word, like olds with the new, haunted chateaus and castles and old school style vampires. And yes, as you notice in the title of the films with this record, lots of vampires. When people think of Jean Rollin, they think of vampires, which they're correct. Many of his films include female vampires. There's some male ones too, somewhere in there. Yes, I'm very much a big fan. The coaster I use every single day for my coffee or water in my office is a scene from one of his most iconic films ever. Probably just an iconic vampire scene in general. This is from the movie Fascination. It's my ceramic coaster and I love it. And believe it or not, Fascination is not a film I will be suggesting as a film to get into him. So yes, this video is kind of like a where to start, but Halloween edition. Fascination is great, but I will tell you why I chose the 3 movies that I did. Here's a fantastic book, also called Fascination, The Celluloid Dreams of Jean Rollin. And Celluloid Dreams is definitely a great description. I don't think there's any more, or I should say, I don't think there's any films that are quite surreal and dreamlike like Jean Rollin. They really, really do feel like a dream. And this book is great. It has all information you'd want to know. It goes in every single individual movie. It goes a little bit into his past and his passion for things and why he does stuff the way he does, and it's just great. I love this picture of him with the film around his neck and the big pipe. It's great. This is so good. But yeah, like I said, some people think his films, or I've seen people describe it like, oh, they're just meant, the only reason these films exist is to show like naked female bodies or lesbian vampires or this and that, which isn't the case. A lot of the images in his films, as he even says, weren't meant to be titillating. They're meant to be mysterious and add to the mystique or fantastique. You're not going to see a lot of just nude woman like in the bedroom or having sex in the bedroom. You'll see like haunting like bodies just dead or draped over water, or you'll see them like in graveyards or gravestones. There are some scenes, like the iconic scene in Shiver the Vampire, where a woman is stabbed by like barbs coming out of like a woman's nipples. Like she's just dressed like this way, just totally trippy visuals. Like when people talk about, I guess old school movies or grindhouse movies or just the trippy, surreal stuff from back then, these are the movies they're talking about. It's these. These are the films. These are Jean Rollin films. These are the totally heavy, crazy, just films from back then that everybody loves to talk about, try to emulate even today. These and Giallos, I have to say. Now, before I get started, some people do mistake Jean Rollin for another director kind of in the same field as him, which is Jesus Franco. And while they definitely do kind of like the same style of films, Jesus Franco is definitely, even though he's Spanish, it's definitely like the pure Euro trash, great B movie schlock kind of stuff, but that's really crazy, really fun. I'd say some of his stuff too is actually very great for going on a like melancholic journey as well. Great, beautiful, colorful visuals. And some of it is just like fun if you're in the mood for that. I actually have a few of his films, just because I love them. I just want to mention them, like Vampirs Lesbos. I guess just even having the name lesbian vampires would make you think it might be a Jean Rollin, but it's not. Or another one of my favorites, which is also from Redemption. We'll be talking about Redemption. The Erotic Rites of Frankenstein. This one is great. I'd suggest this one for any like Jesus Franco newcomer. It's good. Might not be for everyone. Obviously, some people might just think they're silly, fun ones to watch for a drinking game, which you could definitely do that too. And real quick, I wanted to mention of Jesus Franco, there's this 2-volume series, this giant books called Flowers of Perversion. I think I've showed this on the channel before. And it's just this in-depth, beautiful pictures and writing about his films and just so much. It's great. And posters and it's just awesome. This is volume 2, The Delirious Cinema of Jesus Franco. And I also wanted to show this because it's relevant to my channel, and I think Bob, our industrial fan, will love this. It is written by one Stephen Thrower. And if you know who Stephen Thrower is, he's from a little known band I've talked about a few times called Coil. He used to live with Coil when he was younger, and he was part of albums such as Horse Motivator and Love Secret Domain. And I'm sure he was part of others, I just can't think right now. And you can read about that in England's Hidden Reverse. This one. I mentioned this book a lot, but you can read about that here. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. So, I've talked about these movies being very personal and nostalgic for Jean Rollin's, which they are. A lot of motifs and themes. You'll see a lot of the same ones in his films. So I guess let's give a little backstory. Jean Rollin was obviously born in France in about 1938. His dad was in theater production, directing, and while the actual films that his father made himself were influential, the whole concept of making stuff and directing really influenced Jean. He was also heavily influenced by French films, especially when he'd see like storm scenes or any kind of special effects that he knew he wanted to be an orchestrator of storms, as he put it, or of images. He wanted to create just these stormy, dreamy, beautiful art pieces, which I personally feel like he has accomplished. He also used to, when he was younger, he got really into films by watching them at a train station. He'd go to a cinema that was in a train station, which was obviously meant for the passengers while they were waiting for the trains. But this had a very unique experience on him because obviously he's watching these American serials and old style French films, but it was unique because it was at a train station, so you'd have people coming and going, and then like the sound of the train coming and going also influenced just like the sound and feeling of watching something, which he says is one of his greatest treasures, just of movie viewing that you can never really have again because it's kind of hard to experience something like that, especially back then with the more old school style trains. And that train and nostalgia for that part of his life definitely seeps into a lot of his films. One of my favorite films of his, which actually isn't a vampire film, it's called La Rose de Fer, or The Rose of Iron. Excuse my pronunciation. Has this scene where the couple's like embracing, and it's all like very quiet and like foggy and surreal, and all the trains are very static and everything just seems dead. But in the background, you can hear like the sounds of trains moving and coming and going, but nothing's moving. It's a very interesting scene. Very haunting, and it definitely gives the movie its overall feel, which is a fantastic film. Um, the Rose of Iron, or the Iron Rose, also plays into another motif, which is he really accomplishes well in his films, which is the true gothic atmosphere, which of the old meeting with the new. You'll have movies where there's scenes of people being in like modern hospitals or stations or driving cars and just going to modern places, but then they end up at these old abandoned countrysides and chateaus, and everything just feels like it's way far older, which is true gothic atmosphere, and a lot of his films do it well. Living Dead Girl does it well, Fascination does it well. The Rose of Iron does this extremely well because the whole movie is set in this very abandoned, overgrown like cemetery and the whole movie is about a couple trying to escape, and it's kind of a bit like a Louis Buñuel film, like The Exterminating Angel, where something is compelling these people to not be able to leave. Something is mysteriously compelling this couple to continually be lost in this cemetery where they cannot leave. Even though the cemetery is right in the middle of a very public town, it's like right off of a main street too. Like a lot of towns have that when you're on a main street and there's a cemetery right off the road. And you, at the end of the movie too, despite even being in this almost like back in the past cemetery, you can almost see like salvation. They could see the lights of like cars in modern day, and unable to touch it. It's just like the perfect moment of that. Even in Fascination, with the main character abandoning basically his time period and going to this old, seemingly abandoned chateau. He doesn't know that there's two women there. Yeah, but when obviously next to vampires and sad, tragic endings, melancholic views and pictures and colors and beautiful naked woman, obviously. The big thing too, people remember, they think of Jean Rollin films, or a motif that appears all the time, is the beach, the ocean. He went to this one ocean when he was young. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Deep or Diepa Beach, and it appears in almost all of his films. Many of his films is this beautiful, long, stretching, lonely, almost looks like it's freezing, like ocean with these rocks, pillars sticking up out of it, and these chalky, giant, bright white cliffs. It's very beautiful, and obviously it means a lot to him, and it features in a lot of his films. Of usually like the ending or climax will happen at this ocean, or a character will just be having a dream or a fantasy, and they end up at this place, and it doesn't seem out of place because the whole movie is already just so dreamlike. And I know I reuse a lot of the words, but like I said, I don't think of any other films that are more dreamlike than that. It even appears in like the movie like The Iron Rose, where it's all centered in the cemetery, and then randomly she's having this near-death just fantasy, and she's just kind of on this beach and just taking it all in, just walking around naked and being alone and afraid, and just, I don't know. And another one of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite movies ever, and by him, is Lips of Blood. And at the very end, or in the climax, or the sheer sense of freedom, the the vampire, she's just walking around naked and screaming from the cliffs and just enjoying her freedom. And she's always talks about how she wanted to see the ocean and she feels so free. It's just such a great scene. I love it. But yeah, I could go on all day of just even just the visuals and the colors. Like this is prime, beautiful, just film and costumes and props and just bizarre stuff. There's so many famous scenes of like playing a piano out in a cemetery, or the vampire, Enter the Vampire coming through the grandfather clock. That's a very iconic scene. Just so many interesting things. I love and fascination of the two women just like grab the random knife just hidden up in this I believe it, I think I remember it being as like an oriental statue or mantelpiece on their like in their room. It's there's just so much bizarre stuff, but it's good bizarre. It's excellent. Yeah, so how does someone go about going into Jean Rollin? Well, like most things, you can just obviously jump in to any film you want. The vampire films, the non-vampire films. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I think some people try to discredit him as just making, I don't know, sexual films or sex films, because he did direct porn. Now the thing was that all these films for him were very low budget and passion projects. And none of them did well, obviously, because the producers didn't know how to sell them. And in fact, when his very first film, The Rape of the Vampire, when it premiered at the small theater, a riot broke out because the movie was just too like polarizing and crazy, and people like ripped up the palace and theater and they went crazy. Some people also speculate because Jean Rollin does lightly touch on political stuff in a lot of his films, and that Rape of the Vampire actually had a lot of there's a lot of uprising and turmoil in France during that time. That came out about 1967, I believe, and that film also had a lot of turmoil and uprising and people uprising against things and vampires and rioting, so it might have also just, that probably didn't help as well. It's a great film. It's a two-parted film, and some of it's in black and white. It just looks amazing. But yeah, so anyway, he didn't make a lot of money with his films, and he wanted to keep creating these films because he was also a novelist. He suffered from a lot of illnesses, I believe cancer, I'm not quite sure. So when he couldn't film or direct due to health issues, he'd do a lot of writes, and apparently he's more well known as an author than a director, even in his homeland of France. Fuck. But yes, so because of that, a lot of these movies are deeply, deeply personal to him. But he didn't have the money or funding, even though those are very low budget. So he did take up doing porn, which he actually wasn't entirely comfortable with doing pornographic films. I think one of the stories I read in this book was to get him comfortable with it, the actors would, they stripped him naked and they threw him on the bed and they all jumped in with him. They all just like joked around and had a good time, and that made him a lot more comfortable with filming that stuff. He made under a pseudonym, and he has quite a few films under that pseudonym, which aren't very him whatsoever. They're completely for him to make money to do his actual passion projects. One of his most absolute personal films, and like I said, one of my favorite, Lips of Blood, he actually had to put pornographic inserts into it to resell it to make up for the loss for it, which really, really broke his soul. It's really sad. But yeah, his movies are completely different than his pornographic films, and I think should be treated as such. You can totally ignore that stuff and just stick right to his films under his name, not a pseudonym. But yeah, like I said, where should we start? Well, like I said, because some of his stuff can be a bit, I guess, kind of harder to digest to get into, just because of the budget and the effects and the super surrealism, the very non-linear storylines for a lot of these films. I think the best place to start, which is an excellent film, it's a film that kind of isn't a lot like his other films in the sense that it does have a linear plot line, and that it is easy to categorize, because his films are kind of hard to categorize. Like I said, they're not they're not quite just Euro erotic films, and they're not quite horror. They're the fantastique. But this movie definitely isn't the horror, and it's just a fantastic film. This is The Grapes of Death. So I think if you want to get into Jean Rollin, this was actually my first Jean Rollin film too, was The Grapes of Death. Even though, like I said, this isn't a vampire film, and this kind of isn't quite like his usual films, it's still very much a Jean Rollin surreal masterpiece, and this is definitely probably his most straight horror film and straight linear narrative. And it's great. This movie is about a vineyard in France. I like little booklets that Redemption puts out for these. So it's about a vineyard that uses an experimental pesticide for their wine grapes, and the people start getting very sick who drink the wine and inhale this pesticide, and it turns into like The Crazies. If you are a big fan of The Crazies or Rabid by David Cronenberg, I think you would really like this film too. Basically, our main character's fiance is the vineyard owner, and she's trying to get back to her hometown to be with him. And it's just kind of this big long journey of her just trying to desperately get back home while avoiding these zombie-like creatures. But zombies, not really the right phrase for it. They're still very conscious of their actions. They just these people have like melting skin, and they're just enraged. Even though they're conscious of like killing their loved ones, they can't help it. One of the first places she goes to in the movie is this farmhouse where the father has killed the wife, and he's keeping the daughter hostage. And he tries to kill them, and he ends up killing his daughter through a very I won't lie, it's a very erotic kind of death with the pitchfork into his daughter. And he feels terrible about it, but he can't control himself, and he begs the main character to run him over, which she does. And it's just her just running into these very increasingly bizarre and horrifying scenarios. She runs into a town that's completely overrun, and she finds this blind woman, and she's trying to help her find her caretaker. And the blind woman runs off because she doesn't trust her, and she's just surrounded by these crazy rabid people. And then she does eventually get back to the vineyard, but it's a Jean Rollin film, so I will say they're very tragic and melancholy. You won't find a lot of happy endings with them, but the journey is great, and if you go in expecting that, you kind of want it, you kind of long for it, and you know it's going to come. But yeah, this is great, and I will have to mention Redemption, because Redemption, I believe, has all the rights to his films. And even the book I have for Fascination agrees that the absolute best way to watch his films, I wouldn't watch them any way but this way, is on Blu-ray by Redemption. The absolute work they put into the restorations and just how they look is phenomenal. These movies look so much better and great, and they're all uncut too. These are the raw French versions with subtitles, and they're completely uncut. They just look fantastic. Do not ruin Jean Rollin films for yourself. You want to see them the way they're meant to be seen, which is on Blu-ray by Redemption. And they're not too bad too. You can get a lot of these even on Amazon for some of them are $15. I think the most is 20. But yeah, starting with him, I think you should watch Grapes of Death. That should be a starting point, I think, for anyone. I think even if you're just not even interested in getting into his other stuff, if you just want more obscure horror films that you'll really enjoy, Grapes of Death is where it's at. Alright, and the next one, another one that's probably just one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think it's my favorite of his, to be honest. Which, again, it's kind of a bit more of a conventional horror movie. These two I'm mentioning are definitely his actual horror films. Everything else is somewhere in between, but even these films, there is gore. There's lots of gore and violence in these two films, but even every death feels so tragic and hurtful. You feel bad. The killer is both the mourner and the murderer in both these films. It's very much still Jean Rollin being tragic, even though there's gore going on. It's just sad and depressing and just so melancholic. So the next film I think anyone should watch, and again, anyone should just watch anyway if they're into just horror and kind of zombie films, is The Living Dead Girl. Now, I don't have this on Blu-ray yet. I just have this on regular DVD, but the quality for regular Redemptions 2 is very good. I definitely need to get this one. God, it's just so good. There's just so much iconic imagery. The lead actress who plays the Living Dead Girl, I don't know if you can pick up on her face on camera. She's just fantastic. She just plays the role so good, and she's just so stunning and beautiful. He finds some of the most just beautiful women that just play these roles so great. Yeah. His little booklet for this one. Here's a picture of the two main characters when they're little girls. So, the story of the Living Dead Girl. Again, a lot like Grapes of Death, it has to do with human chemicals and messing with the environment and nature. Basically, grave robbers are disposing of some toxic chemical, and while they're robbing a grave, they spill this toxic chemical. They're also like disposing of the chemical while they're robbing graves. I don't know. And it revives this woman who had been dead, and she comes back, and she can't even like speak. She just murders whatever's in front of her, and it's pretty gruesome. And she goes back to this old chateau she used to live, and she's fascinated by this music box that her old best friend Helen used to have. And she's like, there's a scene where she's just playing the piano and she's naked, and she's just realizing where she is. Even though she can't talk, she can only like move around and look. The actress plays this role so well. You can tell she's starting to remember just like where she is. And it's really, really sad. It's really sad when she's just rediscovering everything she had in her life. She's just touching everything, and her hands are all bloodied because she had just murdered these grave robbers. And she's like pushing this old rocking horse and just like touching everything. It's all very slow. A lot of his movies are just very slow going. People just walking and viewing and looking at stuff and touching stuff. It's great. I love it. It's super atmospheric. Meanwhile, her old friend that she made a blood pact with and said that she would love her forever actually is trying to like sell the chateau. Like, she lives there and owns it. And honestly, she comes back to see someone that she thought had tragically died for years. Her best friend in the world is alive, and she's like, what is going on? And as you can imagine, it kind of turns into a little shop of horrors situation. She needs to eat, and her friend wants to love her. So yeah, it's tragic, it's beautiful, and like I said, I'm the bat from the end. It's just so good. The visuals, the acting, the sadness. Yeah. Living Dead Girl, that's another one that you should definitely check out. A good starting point, just like Grapes of Death. Again, try to get the Blu-ray version. I think this one, some of these you can find on the 7 Seas in their Blu-ray quality, but they're not too expensive. Give Redemption some love. They put out a lot of good stuff. They put out some Jesus Franco. They put out some obscure Pinku films as well. They're great. So I'll just show the other film, and then the last film that I think is great to really get into his vampire films. I actually don't own this one, even though I love it so much. I just haven't gotten around to it or buying it yet. So I'll just put it in and show you, is Lips of Blood. Lips of Blood is one I like to show people a lot when they're first new to Jean Rollin. If I know they can handle a bit more non-linear narrative and surrealism, it's great. It's probably one of the few of his films that actually has a very satisfying ending. It's a bit happy. I guess happy is subjective, but it's, again, amazing visuals. This one is just pure Jean Rollin vampires. It's his iconic duo that he puts in a lot of his films, like Requiem for the Vampire, which I don't have either. Another great film. You see these same girls as in like Shiver the Vampire. You see, which is probably his most like funky, surreal 70s one. A lot of iconic scenes come from Shiver the Vampire, but you'll see, like, again, his scene with the two girls. You'll see the same girls in Lips of Blood as like the two main vampires. So, the story of Lips of Blood, well, basically we follow a male protagonist, which is a bit unusual for his films, but he's actually a pretty good male protagonist. And he's at a dinner party and he sees this photograph for a perfume ad, and he's just transfixed by the sighting of, it's like a picture of like an abandoned chateau in cliffs. And he starts having a daydream of a memory he's buried of him visiting the specific place and seeing a beautiful woman dressed in all white, and he's lost from his parents, and she offers for him to come into the castle, and he sleeps there for the night. And he tells her he loves her, and he locks her back in he closes the gate on her too. Clearly she's a vampire, and he closes the gate on her so she can't leave. And he's at the cocktail party with his mom, and he brings it up to her, and very early on in the movie, and you see this throughout the film, is that she like gaslights the shit out of him. Like, she's like, oh, you imagined this, oh, this didn't happen to you, I would have known if a memory like that happened to you. And she's clearly lying. But basically the whole movie is his journey to finding these ruins and trying to stop everything getting in the way of him trying to find this girl in these ruins. What is going on? Yeah, and basically in his journey he ends up unearthing this pack of female vampires. There's 4 of them, and 2 of them are wearing the very iconic Jean Rollin clothes, which is like these lacy see-through like purple and pink outfits where you can see like their naked body through it, and they like blow in the wind. I don't know, it's pretty vampiric. And these female vampires are kind of mysterious and threatening. They seem to kill everyone that tries to get in his way or hurt him. They almost seem to be kind of helping him. So what is going on? Well, you have to watch and find out. It's kind of just a simple vampire love story, and I love vampire love stories. Yeah, it's great. He has so many great films. Like I said, I actually don't own too many. I'm working on it. Iconic 2 orphan vampires, again, the 2 female motifs. Dracula's Fiance, which I'm really excited. Some of his films are still hard to find and see, even online. This is one of them. This one's pretty hard. This one even is still pretty hard to like find online. And look, his very last film, The Mask of Medusa, has been almost like impossible to find. I don't think it has any physical release. I got it from someone who's also a huge Jean Rollin film who had it, so I've been lucky with that. Another great one that isn't a vampire film, this is Demonics, which is a tragic tale of these pirates who plunder ships, who use a cliff on their haunted island to like force these ships to crash onto it, and then they pillage and kill people that crash onto their island. And then these 2 girls, they end up assaulting and taking all their stuff and beating them almost to death, and they basically find the evil devil of the island, and they sleep with him to gain powers to take revenge on the pirates who hurt them. And again, this has some very just deeply disturbing, sad imagery of just beautiful woman strung out on decaying ships just in the middle of the ocean, just floating there ready to drown. It's great. There's so much great imagery in that one. But yes, these, let's see, Grapes of Death, The Living Dead Girl, and Lips of Blood, which I wish I had to show you, but like I said, I'll edit it and put it there. Yeah, these are what you should be checking out. Those are my suggestions to get into Jean Rollin films. I went on a lot about this. I mean, I could talk about these movies for hours, and this video is already extremely long. I just wanted to talk about it for Halloween, you know? Introduce Bob, and then just talk about, you know, my favorite topic, vampires and surrealism and beauty and nostalgia and melancholy. I love melancholic things. It doesn't get more of any of those than his films. And don't let anyone tell you it's trash. You make your own decisions. Like I said, they're not quite horror. They're not quite Euro B erotica trash stuff. They're great. Don't get me wrong. You're gonna get into some like low budget crazy shenanigans, and you're gonna be like, what is going on? But they're great. They're beautiful.